Imagine losing everything, your career, your home, and even your sense of self, only to find hope in the most unexpected place. That's the story of Elena Harper, a once successful entrepreneur who hit rock bottom after a devastating betrayal. Homeless and struggling to survive, she crosses paths with Nathaniel, a cold and ambitious real estate mogul who seems to have it all except love. What starts as a clash of two completely different worlds slowly turns into something neither of them expected. This is a story of resilience, redemption, and a love that blossoms in the unlikeliest of circumstances. Stay tuned, because Elena and Nathaniel's journey will not only inspire you, but also remind you that love can find us, even in the darkest moments. Nathaniel Cross, a 38-year-old real estate CEO, stood at the podium of a grand press conference. Dressed in a tailored navy suit, he exuded confidence and authority as he announced his latest luxury development project, a high-rise condominium in the heart of the city. Investors and journalists filled the room, nodding in approval as Nathaniel outlined the project's sleek design and promise of high returns. Outside the glass walls of the conference hall, however, a group of protesters gathered, holding signs that read, "Affordable housing now," and "Stop displacing families." Their chants were muffled by the thick glass, but their presence was impossible to ignore. Nathaniel glanced at them briefly, his expression unreadable. To him, they were just another obstacle in the way of progress. He had built his empire by focusing on profits, not people, and he wasn't about to let a few protesters derail his vision. Later that evening, feeling restless after a long day, Nathaniel decided to walk home instead of taking his car. As he passed one of his properties, he noticed a woman sitting on the steps. She was wrapped in a worn coat, her hair tied back in a messy bun. She wasn't begging or holding a sign. She just sat there, staring at the ground. "Excuse me, you can't sit here," Nathaniel said curtly, his voice sharp. The woman looked up, her eyes meeting his. They were striking, intelligent, piercing, and filled with a quiet defiance. "I'm not causing any trouble, just resting," she replied calmly. Nathaniel hesitated. Something about her tone and demeanor caught him off guard. She didn't look like the typical homeless person he had encountered before. Without another word, he turned and walked away, but her face lingered in his mind as he continued down the street. Nathaniel Cross's penthouse was the epitome of luxury. Perched atop one of the tallest buildings in the city, it offered a panoramic view of the skyline. The space was immaculate, sleek, modern furniture, abstract art on the walls, and a kitchen that looked like it had never been used. Yet, despite the grandeur, the silence in the apartment was deafening. Nathaniel poured himself a glass of whiskey and sat by the window, staring out at the city below. He had everything most people dreamed of: wealth, power, and influence. But as he sipped his drink, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. His assistant, Maya, had left a stack of documents on his desk earlier that day. Among them was a report about the protests against his new development project. "You might want to address this," she had said, her tone cautious. Nathaniel had brushed her off. "It's just noise," he had replied. "They'll get over it." Maya had hesitated, clearly wanting to say more, but she knew better than to push him. Nathaniel wasn't the type to entertain discussions about morality or community impact. To him, business was about numbers, contracts, and results. As he flipped through the report now, he barely skimmed the details. The protesters claimed that his new project would displace dozens of low-income families, but Nathaniel saw it as a necessary trade-off for progress. "You can't build something great without breaking a few eggs," he muttered to himself. Despite his dismissive attitude, Nathaniel couldn't shake the memory of the woman he had seen earlier that evening. Her calm yet defiant gaze had unsettled him in a way he couldn't explain. He shook his head, trying to push the thought aside. "Why am I even thinking about this?" he muttered, finishing his drink. Nathaniel's life revolved around work. He had no close friends, no family to speak of, and no time for distractions. Relationships, in his mind, were a liability. He had built his empire by staying focused and ruthless, and he wasn't about to change now. But as he sat alone in his penthouse, staring at the city lights, he couldn't help but feel a pang of loneliness, a feeling he quickly buried under thoughts of his next big deal. Elena Harper sat on the steps of Nathaniel's property, her hands tucked into the pockets of her worn coat. The cold evening air bit at her skin, but she barely noticed. She had grown used to discomfort. It was her constant companion now. At 35, Elena had once been a rising star in the business world. She had built a successful catering company from the ground up, earning a reputation for her creativity and work ethic. Her events were the talk of the city, and her future had seemed limitless. But all of that had crumbled in the span of a year. It started with a series of bad investments. Trusting the wrong people, including her business partner, had cost her everything. He had siphoned money from the company, leaving her to shoulder the debts. By the time she realized what was happening, it was too late. The business collapsed, and with it her savings, her home, and her sense of security. Now Elena spent her nights in shelters and her days searching for work. She refused to beg, her pride wouldn't allow it, but finding a job was nearly impossible. Employers saw her disheveled appearance and dismissed her before she could even explain her qualifications. Despite her circumstances, Elena refused to give up. She volunteered at a local food bank, using her culinary skills to prepare meals for others in need. It gave her a sense of purpose, even if it didn't pay the bills. That evening, after another fruitless day of job hunting, she had wandered to the steps of Nathaniel's property. She didn't know why she chose that spot. It just felt quiet, safe. But her peace was interrupted when a man in a sharp suit approached her. "Excuse me, you can't sit here," he had said, his tone cold and authoritative. Elena had looked up, meeting his gaze. She recognized him immediately, Nathaniel Cross, the CEO she had seen on the news earlier that day. His face was all over the city, tied to luxury developments and high-profile deals. "I'm not causing any trouble, just resting," she had replied, keeping her voice steady. He had hesitated, clearly taken aback by her calm demeanor, before walking away. As she watched him leave, Elena felt a flicker of determination. She wasn't sure why, but she decided she would approach him again. Maybe he could help her, or at least listen to her story. She had nothing left to lose. The next evening, Elena returned to the steps of Nathaniel's property. She wasn't sure what she hoped to achieve, but something inside her told her she needed to speak to him. She had spent the day rehearsing what she would say, though she doubted he would even stop to listen. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she saw him approaching. Nathaniel Cross, with his perfectly tailored suit and confident stride, looked every bit the untouchable CEO. He was scrolling through his phone, his attention fixed on the screen, when Elena called out to him. "Excuse me, Mr. Cross," she said, her voice steady despite the nerves twisting in her stomach. Nathaniel stopped, his brow furrowing as he looked up. "You again?" he said, his tone sharp. "I thought I told you not to sit here." "I'm not here to sit," Elena replied, standing up. "I need to talk to you. Just for a moment." Nathaniel sighed, clearly impatient. "I don't have time for this." "Please," she insisted, her eyes locking onto his. "I'm not asking for money. I just want to explain my situation." Something in her tone made him pause. He glanced around, as if checking to see if anyone was watching before crossing his arms. "Fine. You have 2 minutes. Make it quick." Elena took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "I used to run a catering business. It was successful, very successful. I worked with some of the biggest clients in the city. But my business partner betrayed me. He drained our accounts, left me with nothing but debt. I lost my company, my home, everything." Nathaniel's expression remained unreadable, but he didn't interrupt. "I've been trying to get back on my feet," Elena continued. "I've applied for jobs, but no one will hire me. They see someone who looks like me and assume I'm not worth their time." She gestured to her worn coat and scuffed shoes. But I'm not asking for a handout. I just need a chance. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. And you think I'm the person to give you that chance? I think you're someone who understands what it's like to build something from nothing, Elena said, her voice firm. You didn't get to where you are by ignoring opportunities. I'm asking you to see me as an opportunity, not a problem. For a moment, Nathaniel said nothing. He studied her, his sharp eyes scanning her face as if trying to determine whether she was telling the truth. Finally, he spoke. You're bold, I'll give you that. But boldness doesn't pay the bills. Elena's heart sank, but she refused to let it show. No, it doesn't. But hard work does, and I'm willing to work harder than anyone you've ever met. Nathaniel hesitated, clearly torn. Fine, he said at last. You can stay on the steps for a few days, but if you cause any trouble, you're gone. Understood? Elena nodded, relief washing over her. Thank you. Don't thank me, Nathaniel said, already turning to leave. I'm not doing this out of kindness. I just don't want to deal with complaints from the neighbors. As he walked away, Elena watched him, a mix of gratitude and determination in her eyes. She had gotten her foot in the door, now she just had to prove herself. Nathaniel, meanwhile, felt strangely unsettled. He had dealt with countless people asking for help over the years, but something about Elena was different. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but he knew this wasn't the last time their paths would cross. Nathaniel Cross wasn't a man who dwelled on strangers. His life was too busy, too calculated to allow room for distractions. Yet, as he sat in his office the next morning, reviewing contracts and financial reports, his mind kept drifting back to the woman from the steps. Elena Harper. Her name lingered in his thoughts, along with the quiet defiance in her voice and the determination in her eyes. She wasn't like the others he had encountered, those who begged for money or tried to guilt him into charity. No, she had stood her ground, asking not for pity, but for a chance. Nathaniel shook his head, annoyed at himself. Why am I even thinking about this? He muttered under his breath. He had far more important things to focus on. But the distraction persisted. By mid-afternoon, he found himself pulling up a search engine on his computer. He typed in her name, half expecting nothing to come up. To his surprise, there were results, articles, reviews, even photos. Elena Harper had been a name in the city's culinary scene just a few years ago. Her catering business, Harper's Table, had been featured in lifestyle magazines and praised for its innovative menus. There were photos of her at events, smiling confidently in a crisp white chef's coat, surrounded by elegantly plated dishes. Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, intrigued. The woman he had seen on the steps looked nothing like the polished entrepreneur in the photos. Life had clearly been unkind to her, but the fire in her eyes hadn't dimmed. Interesting, he murmured, closing the browser. Elena spent the day trying to make herself useful. She had no intention of sitting idly on the steps, waiting for Nathaniel to change his mind about her. Instead, she walked around the neighborhood, picking up litter and tidying the area. It wasn't much, but it gave her a sense of purpose. She also made a point to speak to the building's staff. The security guard, an older man named Frank, was the first to warm up to her. "You're not like the others," Frank said, watching her sweep the sidewalk with a broom she had borrowed. "What do you mean?" Elena asked, pausing to wipe her brow. "Most people in your situation either give up or get angry. But you're different. You're trying." Elena smiled faintly. "Giving up isn't an option. I've already lost everything. I can't afford to lose myself, too." Frank nodded, impressed. "Well, if you need anything, let me know. I'll do what I can." "Thank you," Elena said sincerely. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Nathaniel found himself walking back to the property. He told himself it was just to check on things, but deep down, he knew he was curious about Elena. When he arrived, he saw her sweeping the steps. She was focused, her movements deliberate, as if she were scrubbing away more than just dirt. "You're still here," Nathaniel said, his voice breaking the silence. Elena looked up, startled. You said I could stay for a few days, she replied, straightening up. I didn't expect you to start cleaning, he said, his tone laced with mild amusement. I'm not going to sit around and do nothing, Elena said firmly. If I'm here, I might as well make myself useful. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. You're not exactly what I expected. What did you expect? She asked, meeting his gaze. He hesitated, then shrugged. I don't know. Someone who'd take advantage of the situation, maybe. Not someone who'd sweep the steps. Elena smirked faintly. I'm not here to take advantage of anyone. I'm here because I need a chance to prove myself. Nathaniel studied her for a moment, then gestured toward the building. Come with me. Elena hesitated, unsure of his intentions, but she followed him inside. The lobby was sleek and modern, with marble floors and high ceilings. Nathaniel led her to a small office near the back of the building. This is the property manager's office, he explained, unlocking the door. It's vacant right now. You can stay here for the time being. It's not much, but it's better than the steps. Elena blinked, surprised. Why are you doing this? Nathaniel shrugged, his expression unreadable. Consider it an investment. You said you wanted a chance. This is it. But don't make me regret it. Elena nodded, her throat tight with emotion. Thank you. I won't let you down. Nathaniel didn't respond. He simply handed her the key and walked away, leaving Elena standing in the doorway of her new, temporary home. As Nathaniel walked back to his penthouse, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just done something out of character. He wasn't the type to get involved in other people's problems. Yet here he was, giving a stranger a place to stay. Don't overthink it, he told himself. It's just temporary. But deep down, he knew this wasn't just about charity. There was something about Elena Harper that intrigued him, something that made him question the life he had built and the choices he had made. And for the first time in years, Nathaniel Cross felt a flicker of curiosity about someone other than himself. Elena sat on the edge of the small cot in the property manager's office, her fingers tracing the worn fabric of the blanket Nathaniel had provided. The room was modest, bare walls, a desk pushed into the corner, and a single lamp that cast a warm glow over the space. To anyone else, it might have seemed insignificant, but to Elena, it was a lifeline. For the first time in months, she had a door she could lock, a place where she could sleep without fear of being asked to leave. She exhaled deeply, letting the weight of her exhaustion settle into the quiet of the room. But she knew this wasn't the end of her struggles. It was just the beginning. The next morning, Nathaniel sat in his office, staring at the skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. His assistant, Maya, entered with a stack of documents, her usual efficient demeanor in place. Here are the contracts for the West Side project, she said, placing them on his desk. Nathaniel nodded absently, his mind elsewhere. Maya hesitated, then spoke again. You seem distracted. Is everything all right? Nathaniel glanced at her, debating whether to share what was on his mind. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. Do you believe people can change? Maya raised an eyebrow, surprised by the question. Change? In what way? Let's say someone loses everything. Do you think they can rebuild, start over? Maya considered this for a moment. I think it depends on the person. Some people let failure define them, while others use it as fuel to grow. Why do you ask? No reason, Nathaniel said quickly, brushing off the question. Just curious. But Maya wasn't convinced. She had worked for Nathaniel long enough to know when something or someone was occupying his thoughts. Later that day, Nathaniel decided to check on Elena. He told himself it was just to ensure she wasn't causing any trouble, but deep down, he was curious to see how she was adjusting. When he arrived at the property manager's office, he found Elena sitting at the desk, surrounded by papers. She looked up as he entered, her expression wary but composed. "Wedding, what are you doing?" Nathaniel asked, his tone neutral. Elena gestured to the papers. I found these in the desk drawers. They're old maintenance records and tenant complaints. I thought I'd organize them, figure out what's still relevant and what can be thrown out. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. You're not being paid to do that. I know, Elena said simply. But I can't just sit here and do nothing. If I'm going to stay, I want to contribute. Nathaniel studied her for a moment, then nodded. Fair enough. But if you're going to work, you might as well do something useful. He pulled out his phone and sent a quick message. A few minutes later, Frank, the building's security guard, appeared at the door. Frank, this is Elena, Nathaniel said. She's going to help you with some of the building's administrative tasks. Show her what needs to be done. Frank looked surprised but nodded. Sure thing, Mr. Cross. Nathaniel turned back to Elena. Consider this your first test. If you can handle it, we'll talk about what's next. Elena nodded, her jaw set with determination. I won't let you down. Over the next few days, Elena threw herself into the work. She helped Frank organize tenant files, updated maintenance schedules, and even drafted a report on overdue repairs. Her attention to detail and efficiency impressed Frank, who quickly warmed to her. You've got a good head on your shoulders, Frank said one afternoon as they worked side by side. Most people in your situation would have given up by now. I don't have the luxury of giving up, Elena replied, her voice steady. If I stop moving forward, I'll never get back on my feet. Word of Elena's efforts began to spread among the building staff. The janitor, a kind woman named Rosa, started leaving extra food for Elena in the break room. The maintenance crew began asking for her input on scheduling repairs. Slowly but surely, Elena was earning their respect. Nathaniel, meanwhile, kept a close eye on her progress. He visited the property manager's office every few days, always under the guise of checking on the building. Each time he found Elena hard at work, her focus unwavering. One evening, as he watched her explain a new filing system to Frank, he felt a strange sense of admiration. She was resourceful, determined, and unflinchingly honest, qualities he rarely encountered in his world of cutthroat business deals. But not everyone was as welcoming as Frank and Rosa. One of the tenants, a wealthy businessman named Victor Lang, took issue with Elena's presence. I don't pay premium rent to live in a building that shelters vagrants, Victor said one evening, cornering Nathaniel in the lobby. She's not a vagrant, Nathaniel replied coolly. She's helping with administrative work. Victor scoffed. I don't care what she's doing. People like her don't belong here. It's bad for the building's image. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. He had dealt with Victor's entitled attitude before, but this time it struck a nerve. I'll take your concerns under advisement, Nathaniel said curtly, walking away before Victor could respond. That night, as he sat in his penthouse, Nathaniel found himself thinking about Elena again. She had already faced so much, and now she was being judged simply for trying to rebuild her life. For the first time, Nathaniel felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, an urge to protect someone other than himself. The next morning, Nathaniel arrived at the property earlier than usual. He had spent the night thinking about Victor Lang's complaints and the way Elena had been quietly proving herself. For a man who prided himself on keeping emotions out of his decisions, Nathaniel found himself increasingly invested in her progress. When he entered the property manager's office, he found Elena hunched over a stack of papers, her brow furrowed in concentration. She didn't notice him at first, so he cleared his throat. Elena looked up, startled. Oh, Mr. Cross, I didn't hear you come in. Nathaniel gestured to the papers. What are you working on now? Frank mentioned that some of the tenants have been complaining about delayed repairs, Elena explained. I'm trying to prioritize the most urgent ones and figure out why they haven't been addressed yet. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. That's not part of your job? I know, Elena said, her tone calm but firm. But if I can help make things run more smoothly, why not? It's better than sitting around doing nothing. Nathaniel studied her for a moment, then nodded. Good. Keep at it. As he turned to leave, Elena hesitated, then spoke up. Mr. Cross. He paused, glancing back at her. Yes? Well, are you helping me? She asked, her voice quiet but steady. You don't seem like the kind of man who does things out of kindness. Nathaniel smirked faintly. I'm not. I told you this is an investment. I want to see if you're worth the risk. Elena nodded, though she wasn't entirely convinced. Well, thank you for the opportunity. Nathaniel didn't respond. He simply walked out, leaving Elena to her work. Later that day, Nathaniel found himself face to face with Victor Lang again. The businessman had requested a meeting in Nathaniel's office, and it was clear from the moment he walked in that he wasn't there to exchange pleasantries. Mr. Cross, Victor began, his tone dripping with condescension. I've been a tenant in your building for over 5 years. I've always appreciated the level of professionalism and exclusivity you maintain, but the situation with that woman is unacceptable. Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. What exactly is the problem, Victor? Victor scoffed. The problem is that she doesn't belong here. People like her bring down the value of the property. If word gets out that you're letting homeless people work in the building, it's going to damage your reputation and mine. Nathaniel's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice calm. Elena Harper is not just some homeless person. She's a former business owner who's trying to rebuild her life. She's working hard and contributing to the building's operations. Victor leaned forward, his tone turning sharp. I don't care about her sob story. Either she goes, or I do, and trust me, if I leave, I won't be the only one. Nathaniel stared at Victor for a long moment, his mind racing. He knew Victor wasn't bluffing. His departure could trigger a chain reaction among the other wealthy tenants. But the thought of giving in to Victor's demands left a bitter taste in Nathaniel's mouth. I'll take your concerns under advisement, Nathaniel said finally, his tone cold. Victor smirked, clearly thinking he had won. Good. I trust you'll make the right decision. As Victor left the office, Nathaniel sat in silence, his hands clenched into fists. For the first time in years, he felt torn between his business instincts and something deeper, something he couldn't quite name. That evening, Nathaniel returned to the property manager's office. He found Elena and Frank going over a list of overdue repairs, their heads bent over the desk. Lena, Nathaniel said, his voice cutting through the quiet. She looked up, surprised to see him again. Yes? Come with me, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Elena exchanged a glance with Frank, then followed Nathaniel out of the office. He led her to the building's rooftop, where the city stretched out before them in a sea of lights. What's this about? Elena asked, shivering slightly in the cool evening air. Nathaniel turned to face her, his expression serious. Victor Lang wants you gone. He thinks you're bad for the building's image. Elena's stomach sank, but she forced herself to stay calm. And what do you think? Nathaniel hesitated, then spoke. I think he's wrong. But this isn't just about what I think. If I keep you here, I risk losing tenants like Victor and the money they bring in. Elena nodded slowly, understanding the weight of his words. So what are you going to do? Nathaniel studied her, his sharp eyes searching her face. That depends on you. If you want to stay, you need to prove to me and to everyone else that you're worth the risk, that you're not just some charity case. Elena's jaw tightened, her determination flaring. I've been proving myself every day since I got here, but if you need more, fine. Tell me what you want me to do. Nathaniel smirked faintly, impressed by her resolve. There's a tenant meeting tomorrow night. Victor will be there, along with several others who share his concerns. I want you to attend and explain yourself. Tell them who you are, what you've been doing, and why you deserve to stay. Elena's eyes widened. You want me to stand in front of a room full of people who already hate me and convince them to give me a chance? Exactly, Nathaniel said. If you can handle that, you'll prove you're not just here to take up space, you'll prove you belong. Elena swallowed hard, her heart pounding. The thought of facing Victor and his allies was terrifying, but she knew this was her chance to fight for herself. "Okay," she said finally, her voice steady. "I'll do it." Nathaniel nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. "Good. I'll be there to make sure they listen. The rest is up to you." As he walked away, Elena stood on the rooftop, staring out at the city. She felt a mix of fear and determination. But one thing was clear: she wasn't going to back down. The next evening, the tenant meeting was held in the building's sleek, modern conference room. The space was filled with polished individuals, business executives, lawyers, and socialites, each dressed impeccably and exuding an air of entitlement. At the head of the room sat Victor Lang, his smug expression making it clear he believed the meeting was already decided in his favor. Elena stood just outside the door, her palms damp with sweat. She had spent the entire day preparing, going over what she would say, but now that the moment had arrived, her nerves threatened to overwhelm her. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. "Are you ready?" Elena turned to see Nathaniel standing behind her. He was dressed in his usual tailored suit, his expression calm and unreadable. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Nathaniel nodded. "Remember, this is your chance to prove yourself. Be honest, but don't let them intimidate you." Elena took a deep breath and nodded. "I won't." Nathaniel opened the door and gestured for her to enter. As she stepped inside, the room fell silent. All eyes turned to her, some filled with curiosity, others with disdain. Victor was the first to speak. "What's she doing here?" he demanded, his voice dripping with contempt. Nathaniel stepped forward, his tone calm but firm. "Elena Harper is here because I invited her. She has something to say, and you're all going to listen." Victor scoffed, but said nothing, clearly annoyed. Nathaniel turned to Elena and gave her a small nod. "The floor is yours." Elena swallowed hard, her heart pounding as she stepped to the front of the room. She could feel the weight of their stares, but she forced herself to stand tall. "My name is Elena Harper," she began, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "Some of you may have heard about me, but most of you probably haven't. A few years ago, I owned a successful catering business called Harper's Table. I worked with some of the biggest clients in the city, and I built my business from the ground up." She paused, scanning the room. Some of the tenants looked intrigued, while others, like Victor, remained unimpressed. "But then I lost everything," Elena continued. "My business partner betrayed me, draining our accounts and leaving me with nothing but debt. I lost my company, my home, and my reputation. For months, I've been trying to rebuild my life, but it hasn't been easy. People see someone like me, someone who's struggling, and they assume I'm not worth their time." Her voice grew stronger as she spoke, fueled by the emotions she had kept bottled up for so long. "When I came to this building, I wasn't looking for a handout. I was looking for a chance. And thanks to Mr. Cross, I've been given that chance. I've been working hard to contribute to this building, organizing files, helping with maintenance schedules, and doing whatever I can to make myself useful." Victor interrupted, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "And we're supposed to applaud you for doing the bare minimum?" Elena turned to him, her gaze unwavering. "I'm not asking for applause. I'm asking for understanding. I know I don't look like I belong here, but I'm not here to take advantage of anyone. I'm here to prove that I'm more than my circumstances." The room fell silent again, the tension thick in the air. Victor leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed. "This is all very touching, but it doesn't change the fact that she doesn't belong here. This building is supposed to be exclusive, and her presence undermines that." Nathaniel stepped forward, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. "Enough, Victor." Victor turned to him, clearly surprised. "Excuse me?" "You've made your point," Nathaniel said, his tone cold. "Now let me make mine." He turned to the rest of the tenants, his sharp gaze sweeping the room. "This building isn't just about exclusivity. It's about community. And whether you like it or not, Elena Harper is part of that community now. She's been working harder than most of you ever have to prove herself, and I'm not going to punish her for that." Victor opened his mouth to argue, but Nathaniel cut him off. "If you have a problem with that, you're welcome to leave, but don't expect me to bend over backward to keep you here." The room fell into stunned silence. No one had ever seen Nathaniel Cross defend someone so fiercely, and it was clear that Victor wasn't used to being challenged. Elena felt a surge of gratitude and respect for Nathaniel, but she knew she couldn't rely on him to fight her battles. She turned back to the tenants, her voice calm but firm. "I know I have a long way to go," she said, "but I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep working, keep proving myself, and keep moving forward. All I'm asking for is the chance to do that." For a moment, no one spoke. Then, to Elena's surprise, one of the tenants, a middle-aged woman in a designer dress, spoke up. "I think she's earned that chance," the woman said, her tone thoughtful. "We've all had moments in our lives when we needed someone to believe in us. Why should this be any different?" A few others murmured in agreement, and slowly, the tension in the room began to ease. Victor, however, remained defiant. "This is a mistake," he muttered, but he didn't press the issue further. Nathaniel turned to Elena, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "It seems the majority is willing to give you that chance. Don't waste it." Elena nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "I won't, thank you." As the meeting ended and the tenants began to leave, Nathaniel lingered behind, watching as Elena spoke quietly with Frank and a few of the other staff members who had come to support her. For the first time in years, Nathaniel felt a sense of pride that had nothing to do with profits or success. He had taken a risk on Elena, and she had risen to the challenge. As he walked out of the conference room, he couldn't help but wonder if helping her was changing him as much as it was changing her. The days following the tenant meeting marked a turning point for Elena. While not everyone in the building had fully accepted her, the majority had softened their stance. Even Victor Lang, though still cold and dismissive, seemed to realize that his complaints would no longer hold much weight. Elena, however, didn't let her guard down. She knew that earning the respect of the tenants and staff was only the first step. If she wanted to truly rebuild her life, she needed to prove not just to them, but to herself, that she was capable of more. One morning, as Elena was finishing up a report on overdue maintenance requests, Nathaniel walked into the property manager's office. He carried a folder in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other, which he placed on the desk in front of her. "For you," he said simply. Elena blinked, surprised. "Coffee?" Nathaniel smirked faintly. "Don't read too much into it. I figured you could use it." "Thank you," she said, taking the cup. She hesitated, then added, "I didn't think you were the type to notice things like that." "I'm not," Nathaniel replied, his tone dry. "But I've been watching you work, and I have to admit, you've exceeded my expectations." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Is that your way of saying I'm doing a good job?" "Don't push it," Nathaniel said, though there was a hint of amusement in his voice. He placed the folder on the desk. "I have a proposition for you." Elena's curiosity was piqued. "What kind of proposition?" Nathaniel gestured to the folder. "I've been reviewing the operations of some of my other properties, and I've noticed a pattern. A lot of them are inefficient, poor management, outdated systems, that sort of thing. I need someone to go in, assess the problems, and come up with solutions." Elena frowned, unsure of where this was going. "And you think I can do that?" "I know you can," Nathaniel said, his tone matter-of-fact. "You've already proven that you're resourceful, detail-oriented, and capable of handling difficult situations. This would be a temporary position, but it's a step up from what you're doing now. It's also a chance to show me, and yourself, what you're really capable of." Elena stared at him, her mind racing. The offer was unexpected, and part of her wondered if she was ready for such a responsibility. But another part of her, the part that had fought tooth and nail to survive, knew she couldn't let this opportunity slip away. "I'll do it," she said finally, her voice steady. Nathaniel nodded, clearly satisfied. Good. You'll start tomorrow. Frank will cover your current duties while you're gone. As he turned to leave, Elena called out, Nathaniel? He paused, glancing back at her. Thank you, she said, her voice filled with genuine gratitude. Nathaniel's expression softened, just for a moment. Don't thank me yet. You've still got a lot to. The next day, Elena arrived at one of Nathaniel's smaller properties, a mid-range apartment complex on the outskirts of the city. The building was clean but unremarkable, and it was clear from the moment she walked in that the staff was overworked and under-resourced. Elena spent the first few days observing the operations, speaking with the staff, and reviewing the building's records. She quickly identified several issues: outdated maintenance protocols, insufficient scheduling, and a lack of communication between departments. One afternoon, as she was going over her notes in the lobby, the building's manager, a middle-aged man named Carl, approached her. You're the one Nathaniel sent, right? Carl asked, his tone skeptical. That's right, Elena said, standing to greet him. I'm here to help identify areas for improvement. Carl crossed his arms, clearly unimpressed. Look, I've been running this building for 10 years. I know what I'm doing. I don't need some outsider coming in and telling me how to do my job. Elena met his gaze calmly. I'm not here to undermine you, Carl. I'm here to help. If we work together, we can make things better for everyone, staff and tenants alike. Carl hesitated, then sighed. Fine, but don't expect me to roll out the red carpet. I wouldn't dream of it, Elena said with a faint smile. Over the next week, Elena worked tirelessly to implement changes. She streamlined the maintenance request system, introduced a new scheduling tool for the staff, and organized a tenant feedback survey to address ongoing concerns. At first, Carl remained resistant, but as he saw the positive impact of Elena's efforts, his attitude began to shift. By the end of the week, he was not only cooperating, but actively seeking her input on other issues. You're not half bad, Carl admitted one afternoon as they reviewed the survey results. Thanks, Elena said with a grin. I'll take that as a compliment. At the end of the week, Nathaniel arrived to check on Elena's progress. He found her in the building's office, surrounded by charts and reports. How's it going? He asked, leaning against the door frame. Elena looked up, a hint of pride in her expression. See for yourself. She handed him a summary of her findings and the changes she had implemented. Nathaniel scanned the document, his sharp eyes taking in every detail. When he finished, he nodded. Impressive. You've done more in a week than most people would in a month. Elena smiled, relief washing over her. Thank you. Nathaniel set the report down and studied her for a moment. You know, when I first met you, I wasn't sure if you'd last a day. But you've proven me wrong. Elena raised an eyebrow. Is that your way of saying I've earned your respect? Nathaniel smirked. Don't push it. They both laughed, the tension between them easing. For the first time, Elena felt like she was truly on solid ground, not just in her work, but in her relationship with Nathaniel. As Nathaniel left the building that evening, he couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Elena had not only risen to the challenge but exceeded his expectations. She was proving to be an asset, not just to his business but to the people around her. For Elena, the experience was a turning point. She had faced her fears, overcome resistance, and shown herself and others that she was capable of more than they had ever imagined. But she knew her journey was far from over. There were still challenges ahead, and she was determined to face them head-on. As she stood in the office, looking out at the city lights, she felt a renewed sense of hope. For the first time in a long time, she believed in herself and in the possibility of a brighter future. A week after her success at the mid-range apartment complex, Elena returned to the property manager's office in Nathaniel's luxury building. The small office, which had once felt like a lifeline, now felt like a stepping stone, a reminder of how far she had come in such a short time. She was organizing her notes when Nathaniel walked in, his presence commanding as always. He carried a folder under his arm and a faint, unreadable expression on his face. "You're back," he said, glancing around the office. "How does it feel?" Elena smiled faintly. "Smaller than I remember, but it's good to be back." Nathaniel nodded, setting the folder on the desk. "I've been reviewing your work at the other property. The improvements you made were impressive. Tenant satisfaction is up, staff efficiency is doubled, and the building's overall operations are running smoother than ever." "Thank you," Elena said, her voice steady but filled with pride. Nathaniel leaned against the desk, crossing his arms. "I have another proposition for you." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Another one?" "This one's bigger," Nathaniel said, his tone serious. "I want you to oversee operations for several of my properties, not just 1 or 2, 5 to start. You'll be responsible for identifying inefficiencies, implementing changes, and ensuring that everything runs smoothly." Elena blinked, stunned. "You want me to manage 5 properties?" Nathaniel nodded. "You've proven you can handle the work. This is your chance to take things to the next level. It won't be easy, and the stakes will be higher, but I think you're ready." Elena hesitated, her mind racing. The offer was incredible. More responsibility, more opportunities to prove herself, but it was also daunting. Could she really handle such a large role? Nathaniel seemed to sense her hesitation. "You don't have to decide right now," he said. "Take some time to think about it. But I'll be honest with you, Elena, I wouldn't be offering this if I didn't think you could do it." Elena met his gaze, her determination flaring. "I don't need time to think about it. I'll do it." Nathaniel smirked faintly, clearly pleased. "Good. You'll start next week. I'll have Maya send you the details." As he turned to leave, Elena called out, "Nathaniel?" He paused, glancing back at her. "When are you doing this?" she asked, her voice quiet but curious. "Why are you giving me these opportunities?" Nathaniel hesitated, his expression softening. "Because I see potential in you. And because I know what it's like to start from nothing." Elena nodded, her respect for him deepening. "Thank you. I won't let you down." "I know you won't," Nathaniel said, and with that he walked out of the office. Over the next few weeks, Elena threw herself into her new role. Managing 5 properties was a monumental task, but she approached it with the same determination and resourcefulness that had carried her through her previous challenges. She spent her days visiting the properties, meeting with staff, and identifying areas for improvement. She streamlined operations, introduced new systems, and worked tirelessly to build trust with the teams she managed. Nathaniel, meanwhile, kept a close eye on her progress. He visited the properties occasionally, always under the guise of checking on operations, but Elena could tell he was genuinely interested in her work. One evening, after a particularly long day, Nathaniel invited Elena to dinner. They met at a quiet, upscale restaurant where the atmosphere was warm and intimate. "You've been doing great work," Nathaniel said as they sat down. "The improvements you've made are already having a noticeable impact." "Thank you," Elena said, her voice filled with gratitude. "But I couldn't have done it without your support." Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. "Don't sell yourself short. You've earned everything you've achieved." As they talked, the conversation shifted from work to more personal topics. Nathaniel shared stories about his early days in real estate, how he had started with nothing but a small loan and a big dream. "I had to fight for every opportunity," he said, his tone reflective. "No one believed in me at first, but I learned that if you work hard enough and refuse to give up, you can prove them all wrong." Elena nodded, her own experiences echoing his words. "I know what that's like. When I lost everything, people treated me like I didn't matter, like I was invisible, but I refused to let that define me." Nathaniel studied her, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. "That's why I respect you, Elena. You don't just survive, you fight." Elena felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly seen. As the weeks turned into months, Elena and Nathaniel's partnership deepened. They worked closely together, not just on improving the properties, but on developing a shared vision for the future. One evening, as they reviewed plans for a new project, Nathaniel turned to Elena. "I've been thinking," he said. "What if we did something different with this property? Instead of another luxury development, what if we created something more accessible? A place where people from all walks of life could live and thrive." Elena's eyes widened, surprised by the suggestion. "You mean affordable housing?" Nathaniel nodded. "Something like that. It wouldn't be as profitable, but it could make a real difference. And I think it's time I started focusing on more than just the bottom line." Elena smiled, her admiration for him growing. "I think that's a great idea, and I'd love to help make it happen." Nathaniel smirked. "I was hoping you'd say that." Together, they began working on the project, pouring their energy and passion into creating something meaningful. For Nathaniel, it was a chance to redefine his legacy. For Elena, it was an opportunity to give back and help others who were struggling, just as she had been. As the project took shape, Elena couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. Just months ago, she had been sitting on the steps of Nathaniel's building, unsure of what the future held. Now, she was not only rebuilding her life, but helping to create something that would impact countless others. Nathaniel, too, found himself changed by the experience. For years, he had focused solely on his career, shutting out anything that didn't serve his goals. But working with Elena had reminded him of the importance of connection, of purpose, of building something that truly mattered. One evening, as they stood on the rooftop of the new development, looking out at the city, Nathaniel turned to Elena. "You've come a long way," he said, his voice quiet but filled with pride. "So have you," Elena replied, meeting his gaze. For a moment they stood in silence, the weight of their journey settling between them. This wasn't just the end of a chapter, it was the beginning of something new. Together, they had built more than just a partnership. They had built a shared vision, a foundation for a future filled with hope, purpose, and possibility. Months later, the affordable housing project was finally complete. The building stood as a testament to everything Elena and Nathaniel had worked for. A modern, welcoming space designed to provide not just shelter, but a sense of community. The grand opening was scheduled for the following weekend, and the buzz surrounding the project had already begun to spread. For Elena, the project was more than just a professional milestone. It was a symbol of her resilience, a reminder of how far she had come since the day she lost everything. She had poured her heart into every detail, from the layout of the apartments to the community spaces designed to bring people together. Nathaniel, too, had changed. The man who once measured success solely in profits now found himself driven by a deeper purpose. The project had forced him to confront parts of himself he had long ignored: his capacity for empathy, his desire to leave a meaningful legacy, and his growing admiration for Elena. The day of the grand opening was bright and clear, the perfect backdrop for the celebration. The courtyard of the new building was filled with people, tenants, community leaders, and members of the press, all eager to see the culmination of months of hard work. Elena stood near the entrance, greeting guests and answering questions. She wore a simple but elegant dress, her confidence radiating as she spoke about the project. Nathaniel watched her from a distance, a faint smile on his face. He had always admired her determination, but seeing her in her element, strong, capable, and passionate, filled him with a sense of pride he couldn't quite put into words. As the event began, Nathaniel stepped up to the podium to address the crowd. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice steady and commanding. "This project represents a new chapter, not just for this community, but for me personally. For years, I've focused on building properties that cater to the elite, but this time, I wanted to do something different, something that would make a real difference." He paused, his gaze sweeping the crowd before landing on Elena. This project wouldn't have been possible without the hard work and vision of one person in particular. Elena Harper has been the driving force behind this development, and her dedication has inspired me in ways I never expected. Please join me in giving her a round of applause." The crowd erupted into applause, and Elena felt her cheeks flush as she stepped forward to join Nathaniel at the podium. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "When I first started working with Nathaniel, I never imagined we'd end up here, but this project has shown me that even in the darkest times, there's always a way forward. I hope this building will be a place where people can find not just a home, but a fresh start, just like I did." The applause grew louder, and for a moment Elena felt overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. But as she looked out at the crowd, she realized that this was her moment, a culmination of everything she had fought for. Later that evening, after the crowd had dispersed and the building had grown quiet, Elena and Nathaniel found themselves alone on the rooftop. The city stretched out before them, its lights twinkling like stars. "You did good today," Nathaniel said, his voice soft but sincere. "Oh, did you?" Elena replied, leaning against the railing. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the day settling over them. "I never thought I'd be doing something like this," Nathaniel admitted, his tone reflective. "For so long I was focused on the next deal, the next big project, but this feels different." Elena nodded. "It's because it matters. It's not just about money or success. It's about people." Nathaniel turned to her, his gaze intense. "You've changed me, Elena. You've made me see things differently, and I don't just mean business." Elena's breath caught, her heart pounding as she met his gaze. "Nathaniel!" He stepped closer, his voice low but filled with emotion. "I don't know where this is going, but I know I don't want to lose you. You've become more than just a partner to me. You've become someone I care about, someone I respect." Elena felt a surge of emotion, her walls crumbling as she allowed herself to be vulnerable. "I care about you too, Nathaniel. More than I ever thought I would." For a moment, they stood there, the unspoken feelings between them finally coming to the surface. And then, slowly, Nathaniel reached out and took her hand. "We've both been through a lot," he said, his voice steady. "But maybe this is our chance to start over. Together." Elena smiled, her heart full. "I'd like that." In the weeks that followed, Elena and Nathaniel's relationship deepened. They continued to work together, their shared vision driving them to take on new challenges and projects. But they also made time for each other, finding moments of joy and connection amidst their busy lives. For Elena, life was finally starting to feel whole again. She had rebuilt her career, found a sense of purpose, and discovered a partnership that went far beyond business. For Nathaniel, the journey had been just as transformative. He had learned to let go of his guarded nature, to open himself up to the possibility of something more. Together they were building not just a future, but a legacy, one that would stand as a testament to their resilience, their determination, and their belief in the power of second chances. As they stood on the rooftop of their latest project, looking out at the city they had both come to love, Nathaniel turned to Elena and smiled. "This is just the beginning," he said. Elena nodded, her heart full of hope. And with that, they stepped forward together into a future they had rewritten, one filled with possibility, purpose, and love. Life is full of second chances, and sometimes all it takes is one opportunity to rewrite your story. If this journey of resilience, transformation, and hope inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that touch the heart and ignite the spirit. Let's build a community where we celebrate growth, kindness, and the power of believing in each other. Your support helps us continue sharing these meaningful stories. Join us on this journey because everyone deserves a chance to start over. Imagine losing everything, your career, your home, and even your sense of self, only to find hope in the most unexpected place. That's the story of Elena Harper, a once successful entrepreneur